Yes, the Chinese mystery snails. Yeah, they taste fine. I mean, the context we do have context for eating snails. It's easy to be like, ew, snails, but okay, the French escargots, or look at conch. If you've ever had conch fritters, that's a big aquatic snail. It's they're not taxonomically all that different. I did an event once at Fleury, a French restaurant on the downtown mall with a Parisian-trained chef, and we tried a whole bunch of recipes, traditional French recipes, and we cooked the French escargots side by side with the Chinese mystery snails. And actually, the taste was the same, but the texture of the French snails is infinitely superior. It's much more delicate, and so that's not the cuisine to look to for that. So what I started experimenting with instead, I thought, okay, let's look at recipes for conch, because these guys are a little bit tough like conch. I mean, they're sort of like, if you just fry them up, they're going to be like slightly rubbery fried clams. And so I think recipes for conch are really, because you pound the conch to tenderize it. When you look to conch recipes for these, they're great. I cooked them also with Andrew Zimmern from Bizarre Foods. I did an episode of Bizarre Foods with him, and we were going to do the conch fritters, but he ended up just sort of making. He just sort of made it up as he went along, and I think we just had a little bit of like garlic and onions and a few other things. Just doing them in the pan really quickly and eating them with chopsticks, and it was delicious. So yeah, they taste fine. It tastes sort of like, again, I think like clams or conch would be a good comparison.
I'm thinking about the professions of wildlife management and fisheries management, which of course emerged from the environmental movement with Aldo Leopold and all those sorts of things. I'm interested in your view of them as a profession and scientists as a group. Do they seem to be hip to the, I know a lot of them think the world is an aquarium because I've dealt with them.
Yeah.
They're going to fix this species, they're going to take that species, and they're going to do something, always with some unexpected result. But interacting with them, why wouldn't they see, as you see, the economic opportunity? Let's take something similar or simple, like tilapia in Florida.
Yeah.
Where are they on that issue? They call them invasive or exotic. It seems to be making a judgment about some recent relationships as distinct from, all right, we got them here. Maybe that's good, or maybe we can. You know what I mean?
Okay, it depends on the biologist. Okay, so there's different groups. I think the biologists that work for state agencies that are managing fisheries for people buying fishing licenses, they're more likely to try to see the positive side of it and say, well, I've been here for a while, maybe people like catching them. And then I think biologists who aren't working for agencies like that are more likely to say, get rid of them. Biologists as a whole are some of the happiest people I have ever met. I spend time with biologists every week. I had lunch with a bear biologist yesterday, and I spend a lot of time with people who do aquatic stuff and people who work with deer. They're such happy people because this is what they're geeky about. This is what they love. They like being out there playing with wildlife and looking at it, and they get to do that, wake up every day, and they love doing that. I do think that a lot of it's sort of a mixed bag. Some of them don't really want to commercialize this stuff because, they're looking at it through the Aldo Leopold vet lens. They're looking at it through the lens of, gosh, we have to be careful. We have to conserve wildlife. But look, this is wildlife we don't want to conserve. We want to get rid of it. There's also a tendency among some biologists to not do stuff where it's like, look, well, it's not their job to take action. They want to study it. And actually, this has happened. I can think of a lot of examples of this where biologists who are just very smart, dedicated, hardworking people have actually prevented invasive species removal programs because their instinct is, this is a thing that's going on, I want to study it. In fact, I ran into this in Back Bay when I was on Back Bay, which is right just south of Virginia Beach. There's a federal wildlife refuge, and so it's under federal management, and it's full of feral pigs. And Virginia has a pretty aggressive stance towards getting rid of feral pigs so we don't get them established all across the state. And Virginia Beach has been really serious about it. And so you'll have these big efforts where the Department of Game, Inland and Fisheries and the state level come in and trap the pigs and really knock them down. But they have limited access to the federal land because it's being managed by Fish and Wildlife with a lot of input from biologists from the USDA actually. And they'll limit access, and so then you'll have this cycle where, okay, we knocked them back, but then you've got this base population that's protected on the federal land that come out. So I went out to participate in pig hunts there 2 different years in a row. and had the opportunity to talk to a USDA biologist out there who was a very nice guy but didn't seem to understand that. I had this conversation with him where he said, I had actually an ecology class in college years before. I had spent like a week out there doing field work. I thought, wait a minute, I said, I came out here to Back Bay a long time ago in the mid-90s, and we were gathering data on the effects of the pigs and another invasive species, nutria, on this habitat, and you're still doing the study. He said, yes. So, what about eradication? I mean, it seems like if you just if you had year-round access, if you had a handful of hunters who just came out here and hunted and trapped really aggressively, you could get rid of them. And he said, yeah, we could, but the problem is we have a study going on, to study the pigs, to study the impact on the ecosystem. We would like to get rid of them, but it'd be too dangerous to have people out hunting them while we have the researchers in the field. And so I was sort of perplexed, and I said, but. So why not? Maybe you should, stop the study to allow eradication. So, well, if we stop the study, then we wouldn't use all the grant, and then we won't get the grant money next year. So at no point in this logical situation they've constructed, at no point do you begin eradication, because you start eradicating it and you don't have anything to study anymore. You don't have a grant, and you don't have anything for. I mean, there's a certain currency to these invasive species once they get kind of sexy, because if you're studying it, you can get a grant from the USDA, you can get a bunch of money, you can go in and do it, and if you're affiliated with a university, you've got something for your PhD candidates to go and do. You've got fun field trips to take the undergrads on. Why would you want to eradicate that? And you get to complain, oh, the pigs are bad. We need to get rid of them. We need to study them, and they've been studying them for decades, and they're just not going to eradicate them. So sometimes you find that situation, but all biologists are not the same. There's a lot of debate going on.
Yeah, I concur that a lot of tenured professors in these universities, and it's true of agriculture as well as aquaculture, their livelihood, their research depends upon continued study, yep. and some reports, of course, but usually we'll have to study that again next year. But what do you make, one final question, at least for me, what do you make of the simultaneous problem of extinction, the competition among species for life, including our species, for let's say bass in Chesapeake Bay and Menhaden, on the one hand, and the proliferation of fish who are considered invasive or exotic, thriving and seemingly growing in huge numbers, but somehow not seen as a potential resource either for eating algae in Phoenix or for diets. What do you make of that?
I think it's something that can be corrected with marketing. This was done deliberately with the Patagonian toothfish. There was a marketing company that was brought. It was a bycatch. It was something that people didn't really want. They didn't have a market for it. And this is decades ago. They had a marketing team that came in and said, well, we're going to repackage it as Chilean sea bass. And they had a series of very deliberate efforts to get chefs to experiment with it, and they get it in influential restaurants, and they made it the sexy thing. Because somebody put money on the barrelhead and said, okay, we're gonna put money into creating a market for this. And I've traveled all around the East Coast and other parts of the country trying to, but there's nobody's paying me to do that. I think if you had a nonprofit that said we're going to put $5 million over a 5-year period into taking a few of those species and shifting demand for fish from striped bass, say, towards silver carp, yeah, that could be done. It could be done, but nobody's putting money into it. Yeah, people can be convinced to do this as just as anyone bother. You had a question?
Yeah. So I understand going in and for a certain species, from a self-interested perspective, that this animal has meat and I can create a market, it's commercially viable. But it seems like there's a moral component to the kind of intervention, this conservation and human intervention stuff that you do. And I was just wondering, do you think there's a moral impetus for us to go into these species and either exterminate them or something, especially given that there are these unforeseeable things like cold snaps and floods that sometimes take care of these species? Why specifically should humans go in?
Because these are every single species that I've talked about here today, and there's a lot of other species covered in the book, and a lot of things I hunted that weren't covered in the book. These are all things that were introduced by human actions. These are things that we did. And I would look at it, I mean, you could take the same, I think you might as well make the same argument for, if somebody takes, a truckload of mercury and dumps it in a lake. Well, maybe we should just let the mercury, that's just evolution, and a lot of fish are going to die from the mercury, and oh well, you just got to let it. No, we wouldn't say that. And you have something that human beings have done. We have put something in this ecosystem that is killing things and transforming the habitat and threatening the continued existence of native species. I don't. So I look at it through that lens. If we were whether we're dumping PCBs or zebra snails, one way or another, these are things that human beings have done, and I think we have a collective responsibility to look after that. And again, it's about, for me, it's that the rock bottom value is preventing extinction. And so yeah, in some cases, a 50-year, 100-year cycle will destroy these. Yes, not in all cases. And then in other cases, okay, so maybe the species disappears after 50 years, but has the damage been done? Has irreparable damage been done where something has gone extinct or gotten to a point where it's not genetically viable anymore? So that's where I'm coming from ethically. Yes.
You mentioned stink bugs. What preys on them, and how much damage do they do?
What preys on them here? I've actually seen quite a lot of spiders prey on them. So for a long time, I had a bluegill fish in an aquarium that, and I actually had a bunch of I'd set up a tank just to observe. I had all native things, all things from this Tatcha Creek Reservoir that I put in there to observe how they interacted. And I had a bunch of the Chinese mystery snails because I wanted to see in this little tank environment, exactly how would the native snails I put in there with them disappeared. So I had this tank going as sort of a long-term experiment. I had a bluegill in there also, and I had to feed this bluegill, and I didn't want to give him flake food, so I would catch moths and things, and when the stink bugs started showing up, I would put the stink bugs in to try it, and it would, every time this fish would come up, it grabs the stink bug off the surface of the water and would spit it out again. Yeah. Would not eat it. So yeah, I can tell you, fish don't like them, or at least bluegill don't. Even when it was really hungry, it would take that and spit it out. I don't know if it's the taste or if it's the thickness of the shell or what it was. On the other hand, I've seen quite a lot of spiders eating them. A lot of birds that should be physically capable of eating them. I've observed birds, kind of going at one and then deciding never mind. So that's what, again, I'm not an expert on stink bugs. I haven't eaten them and I'm not going to. Yes?
I have a question and
One
a
of these baits,
recommendation.
Sure.
So my question is, it seems like a lot of these stories start with aquarium dumping.
Yep.
So I'm just curious if since you're operating in this world, is there any kind of movement, legislation, idea that maybe,
It's generally
for example,
illegal.
New Zealand would never let you build an aquarium with these kinds
Yeah.
of fish because they're very protective of their isolated ecosystem. Is there any kind of impetus to, not sell these kinds of things to American aquarium?
Yeah, they've got some. They're in Florida. They've been moving in that direction. I think that the low-hanging fruit. Legislation is going to be legislation. They're giving the legislation teeth because people will. If you just pass a law and say you can't have this, you can't do this. This stuff is out there. Hobbyists already have them. There's no way that you're going to have that this will ever become enough of a priority for fish and wildlife that they're going to be like having sting operations for people trading cichlids in online fish forums. I don't. As much as I would like to say, we're going to have legislation that solves it, I don't think that's the best solution. I guess in some subtropical states in Louisiana and Florida, yeah, I guess maybe it does make a little bit more sense. But I think that. It would be great if there was some organization that would have a program to educate employees at pet stores and in aquarium shops. Well, I've never seen a sign up, and I used to be a fish hobbyist with aquariums, and I've never gone into a fish store and seen a sign up explaining these are the risks. Or I've never had an employee at a pet store who sold me a fish say, listen, do you understand what the consequences would be if you dump that out? There's no awareness, and I think that would be low-hanging fruit. That would be really easy to have a campaign. And these are the people who buy a lot of the serious hobbyists. The people who just buy the goldfish, and there are wild goldfish in Virginia from aquarium dumping. There are people who just buy all the goldfish and look at it, but most of the these more exotic things like the snakeheads and that sort of thing are being kept by people who are really feel passionately about fish. And if they understood the danger to native fish in their own habitat, look, it's not just about, okay, you don't want to kill your pet when it gets too big, okay, but you're passionate about fish and you're passionate about the diversity of fish and realize that you are threatening the existence of some of these things here. So I think just an awareness campaign would have tremendous impact if somebody would pay for something like that and have somebody go around the pet stores and provide them with signs and provide them some kind of training.